Hi all, and welcome to episode 3 of What Cause Inspires You. I'm your host, Alisha Gupta, and today I have with me Jonathan Bell. I launched What Cause Inspires You podcast as a way for students to share their service in their communities. We encourage youth like Jonathan, who are making a change to improve the world, to speak up about their stories and become a leader in the movement. Jonathan, a high school junior from Louisville, Kentucky, is an advocate for stuttering awareness and has created a YouTube documentary on stuttering to bring light to the issue. Jonathan is also a self-published author and a writer and has an interest in environmental activism and filmmaking. Before we start the presentation, I'd advise everyone to set your video on speaker's view so you can see both me and Jonathan as we speak. We are recording this presentation and we'll post the video on YouTube by Saturday and the audio on Spotify by Friday. All right, Jonathan, are you ready?
I'm all set, and thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So we'll just begin. What made you apply as a speaker on this podcast, Jonathan?
Yeah, so this podcast is, first and foremost, a really great opportunity to spread the message and increase stuttering awareness. And stuttering awareness is something that has gotten more publicity recently, but certain incidents in the news and things like that have still shown us that it's still important to keep working towards awareness. And just as an example of this, Joe Biden is often criticized in the news sometimes for just the way he speaks, and a lot of people don't know that he's actually a person who stutters. And but some people assume that because of the way he speaks, he's got something wrong mentally, or that he's a bad candidate or something like that, just because of his stuttering, which obviously isn't true. And then also, I've gotten a lot of input from many speech therapists and other professionals, and I've had a lot of opportunities to interact with other people who stutter, and I've gotten a lot of help with understanding what stuttering is, and I want to work to share those insights and to really help other people who stutter, and just as many people as I can in general. And then also, just personally, it's a great opportunity to challenge myself as a person who stutters, and to improve my fluency and increase my public speaking skills and things like that. So thanks for
I
having
think
me.
yeah, of course. I think that's amazing. And all the work you've done is great. And we definitely need to break that stigma around stuttering. So can you tell us a little bit about what stuttering is?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, stuttering is a speech dysfluency, and it kind of presents itself in three main ways. There are blocks or kind of abnormal stoppages of sound. It just kind of sounds like this, or repetitions, la 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 la, like this, or prolongations, like this, things like that. But it can manifest itself in other ways too, and it's pretty rare. It affects about 1% of the population or so, and interestingly, it affects more boys than girls, and it starts around the ages of 2 to 3 years old or so, in most cases, and it affects all races and all ethnicities across the board, and also it's very dynamic. Some people who stutter are fluent for months, and then have significantly decreased fluency seemingly out of the blue. Everyone who stutters has a different experience with it. And kind of because of these things, it's not really well understood by scientists. There have been lots of studies that have come out in recent years, trying to understand more things about it, but it's still somewhat of a medical mystery. And kind of because of these things, it's difficult for people who don't stutter to understand it. It's not the same as when people who don't stutter stumble over their words occasionally. I've used this analogy before, but it's kind of like when you're trying to swing a bat to hit a baseball, right? You know how to do it in your head. Um, you know how to hit the ball, but when you go to swing, something is stopping you. you just can't hit it as well as other people can. So it's kind of like that. You know what you want to say in your head, and you know how to say in your head, but it's kind of like the actuation of words becomes much more difficult. And because of these things, it can be really frustrating and tiring, and even depressing too. A lot of people I've met who stutter have dealt with depression and anxiety at some point in their lives.
I think that analogy was a great way to kind of open our minds up to see exactly what stuttering is and how it affects a bunch of people. Before we actually get into Jonathan's story and journey with stuttering, Jonathan, I've heard you created a 20-minute heartwarming documentary called On Stuttering. Nico will be posting the full YouTube link in the comment section. But for now, let's play a little bit of that.
Russell is a chronic stutterer who began his career as a financial writer. Yet, against all odds, he's become a successful public speaker as well, speaking at many financial conferences. His journey, however, was not easy.
And of course, I had so many problems with friends and at school, people teasing me and whatnot. So it was a pretty significant part of my childhood. I was a black belt in karate when I was roughly your age, and I would compete at karate tournaments. And part of karate tournaments is you need to give a short speech in front of the judges before you can compete. And it was just a nightmare for me. I mean, I just dreaded every second of it. And I mean, I would literally lose sleep before karate tournaments, not thinking about, how I would compete, but just I would lose sleep over the speech about it. So it was a pretty defining moment of my childhood that really stuck with me. I think stuttering is different because it's so rare that you have people that the first time they experience it, they just say, "What the heck was that? What are you doing? Why are you stumbling? Why are you I don't get it." And they assume maybe you're trying to be funny. Maybe people get confused. And I think the natural reaction for people when they are confused, even good-hearted people, when they are confused, I think they kind of default to maybe laughing just to deal with their confusion. So I think a lot of the teasing that comes to stutterers is actually not done by bad people. And this is a really important point for stutterers to understand, is that a lot of the people teasing you aren't trying to be mean to you necessarily. Some are, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of people are just confused about what's going on. And that's why I think stuttering awareness is so important. Because when people are more aware of what stuttering is, and if they realize that people who are stuttering are not dumb people, they're not bad people, they're not stupid people, they're normal people like everyone else who have something that's a little bit different about them. If more people recognize that, fewer people will tease stutterers when they come across one.
Later on in that interview, he goes on to talk about how he got to be speaking in front of really thousands of people all over the world, and that's something he never thought he'd be able to do. But I think that's just a really inspiring example to really educate both people who do stutter and those who don't about what's possible for someone who stutters.
Yeah, of course. So when did your work with stuttering awareness begin, your journey with stuttering awareness?
Yeah, sure. So as for my own personal journey with stuttering, I've dealt with stuttering for pretty much as long as I can remember. And I've been really fortunate to have very few experiences with bullying, and I get confused looks from people occasionally, or someone says something like spit it out or slow down, or times when someone mimics me or something like that. But that's really just about as bad as my experience has been. And I think I've been really fortunate so far in that. And but it has been hard in other ways too. Some days I have a much harder time with fluency and lots of other things that people who don't stutter would tend to take for granted become a lot harder for someone who stutters. And one example that really sticks in my mind is in seventh grade, I was in charge of this book club of about 20 other people, and I just started through the whole thing, and I could hardly get a word out, and thankfully no one did or said anything mean, but it felt really, humiliating, and it was physically and mentally exhausting, to want to say something and to have something to say in your head, but to not be able to say it as well as you would like to. And I remember trying to walk out of there as fast as I could once it was done. But I've had lots of positive experiences too. Those are important too. I've been to a camp for people who stutter called Camp Shout Out, where I met lots of other people who stutter, and I've been really fortunate to find great community there, and to learn so much more. And but some of the people I've met there have been terribly bullied as a result of their stuttering, and so much so that some have even tried to commit suicide. Um, and then also there are some Hollywood films even that depict people who stutter in a really bad way, depicting them as psychopaths, or sources of comedy, or being stupid, or things like that. And so when you kind of combine all these things, many people who have never heard of it are really confused, as Morgan House said in the interview, when they hear someone who stutters, and as a result they might try to make a joke out of it, something they think is harmless, but really can seriously damage the self-esteem of someone who stutters. And so these things make me really passionate about working to increase stuttering awareness. And so my work with that kind of started in fifth grade or so, where I gave several presentations to different classes. And then my work kind of resumed in eighth grade, where I started working on that YouTube video. And I finished that summer after my freshman year. And then my sophomore year in the fall, I gave several presentations to the staff at my school and to a school advocacy club, based on the video that I made. And yeah.
That's a very inspiring journey, saying that you faced certain outcomes and you've managed to supersede them and actually create that to bring awareness for the community. So props to you about that. Throughout your journey, who has been this inspiration for you that kind of have led you to make a stance for awareness?
Yeah, so I've had lots of speech therapists and friends who stutter, and other friends and family. And there have been a lot of other people who've made a really positive impact on me and helped me. But I guess if I didn't name just one person, I would say Kristen Camilla. She's one of my current speech therapists, and I've known her since first grade, I think. She's been hugely influential and inspirational to me. She's a person who stutters as well, and she knows that people who stutter can feel like they're not in control a lot of the time, because of how hard it can be, to do things other people might take for granted. So Miss Kristen really focuses on putting the power back in the hands of the person who stutters. And she's done that for me and for so many other people who deal with stuttering. And I'd like to take the same approach to just starting to really put the power back in the hands of the people who stutter.
You mentioned that stuttering is really rare. So for people who haven't really met someone who stutters, what should they know about it to bring awareness to it?
Yeah, sure. So the first and foremost, I would say that stuttering does not indicate someone's character or intellect or success whatsoever. Outside appearance has no indication of what someone is worth. And I mentioned Joe Biden, but also Winston Churchill and Ed Sheeran and Tiger Woods and Emily Blunt and James Earl Jones and lots of these other really successful people have all dealt with stuttering. That's really important to know. And also the people I've met who stutter are some of the most brilliant and hardworking and really thoughtful and respectful people that I've ever met. And in lots of cases, I would say because of stuttering. and it tends to foster, perseverance, and it forces us to think about what we're going to say before we say it. Those are some really important things to understand. But then I would also ask those of you who don't stutter to give us the time we need to say what we want to say. Don't try to help us by saying things like slow down or speak up. Don't try to anticipate what we're going to say or fill in words or things like that. Those things really don't help us that much. And sometimes the person who stutters will block on a word, and there may be what feels like awkward silence to you. But the best thing you can do is to just listen and to let there be silence. That's really important to do. And then kind of the last thing I would say in that regard is that everyone's got something. Everyone's got some struggle or something like that they're dealing with in their life. But just because it's easier to see the struggles someone else is going through is not a reason to withhold respect from them. It's really important to know.
Yeah, and as someone who enjoys finishing other people's sentences, whether I mean it or not, I think that is a very important and loud message we all need to hear and adhere to. So what would you tell people who do stutter, and how would you tell them to face their challenges?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that stuttering is definitely not your fault. It's not a fault. And stuttering does not define who you are. And I would also say that there are lots of people who stutter, ranging all demographics, and it's really important to find community with other people who stutter. That's something that's really helped me a lot. And then also, we have so many experiences that feel like they're out of our control sometimes. So it's important to really take control by guiding the conversation about stuttering. And one example to kind of illustrate this is that I send a letter to all my teachers each school year, before the school year starts. I mean, just explaining that I stutter and telling them what they should and shouldn't do. For instance, I tell them that I do want to be called on in class. But some people who stutter would say the opposite. So I'd say that's just one example of a really great way to put the control back in your hands for someone who stutters. And then I would also say that your fluency can be improved. That's important to know. But that doesn't have to be your goal if you don't want that to be your goal. It's the responsibility of other people to treat you with respect, and to listen to you no matter how you sound to them. And if you're treated otherwise, it's important to speak up. But as Morgan Housel was saying in that video clip, there will always be well-intending people who you encounter who just get confused, I think, when they hear someone who stutters for the first time, and may insult you without meaning to. And educating those people about stuttering is important, but also giving them grace is important too. And then kind of the last thing I'd say in that regard is that you can do anything you want to. Like, you truly can. Don't let stuttering hold you back. And sometimes it takes a lot of hard work to do what you really want to do. Sometimes more so than someone who doesn't stutter would have to put in. But you truly can do anything you want to, and achieve any goal that you want to.
You can do anything you want to. I love that. I think that's a great message. So after On Stuttering and after this podcast, Jonathan, what do you plan to do next?
So mainly I'm just going to keep taking opportunities like this one to spread the message and increasing awareness, and just any opportunity I get on a daily basis to talk to someone about stuttering. I'm just going to take those opportunities and just trying to increase awareness.
And how can other people help you on this journey?
Well, I would say firstly that if you ever speak with someone who stutters, be understanding and give them the time to say what they want to say. without interrupting or filling in words, things like that, and to stand up for people who stutter. But I would also say sharing the video I made and sharing my website. I think links will be posted for that later on. And sharing those things I hope can help other people who stutter, and just everyone in general. Encourage them and to increase awareness and things like that. And also, if you know someone who stutters, or if you stutter, there are a lot of great organizations out there to definitely check out. Like there are 4 main ones. There's the Stuttering Foundation, the National Stuttering Association. Let's see, there's the Stuttering Association for the Young, and the American Speech Language Hearing Association. Those are 4 really great organizations to check out. And I think links for that will be posted too later on. But yeah, if you haven't checked those out, take a look at their websites. And then I would also encourage people who stutter to give presentations and write articles and create videos and things like that to increase awareness.
Awesome. And Nico will be posting the link to both Jonathan's On Stuttering YouTube documentary as well as his website. Jonathan, I love the work that you've been doing to raise awareness, and we can only hope and encourage that more students follow the movement and do the same. I will be posting my email address in the chat. Anyone has questions about What Cause Inspires You podcast series, as well as posting the application form to be a speaker. We love hearing about all the action youth are taking. The future of What Cause Inspires You will be hosting a scholarship opportunity, so be sure to register for every podcast, share the link with families and friends, and join the movement. Next week on Wednesday, June 10th, at the same time, I will be on with Sydney Floyd while she discusses finding passion in oneself and making a difference for homelessness.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Hello.
So, Jonathan, this is Larry Stein. That took me about 50 years to be able to say that. And I just want to congratulate you for coming forth as a person who pretty heavily stuttered for 50 years. And I've known Chris and Camilla for about 35 years or so. To the people on the call, you have no idea what an amazing accomplishment Jonathan is doing right now, handling this. I'll tell you, I wasn't ready to do that till my late 50s, and I just want to ask you, I mean, I'm just really impressed. How did you, I mean, for me, I hid for 50 years. I would never have done what you just did. And I'm interested, what gave you the motivation and the courage to not let stuttering stop you and move forward with your life in such an impressive fashion?
Well, yeah, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. I would just say that, when you speak, I've been really fortunate to have few experiences with bullying and things like that. But when I've spoken with people who have really been terribly bullied as a result of their stuttering, and you see the pain that they've experienced, it's things like that really show me that it's so important to keep working to increase the awareness of this issue.
Good for you. Thanks again, Jonathan.
Yeah,
you're great.
Thank you.
Hi, Jonathan. It's Sydney Floyd. I'm so excited to be on here next week for you guys and share my story. But I didn't have a question as much as I had a statement. I hope you realize how many people you have inspired tonight, and you're going to inspire. You have a bright future ahead of you, and I hope to work with you in the future and spread your story even more and your dreams of helping others. So congratulations. And it was very interesting when you said Winston Churchill, because he says one of my favorite quotes of all time: we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. So thank you for sharing that with us, and I really appreciate you.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you once again for being on this podcast and really bringing light to an issue. about stuttering. And thank you all for attending. We hope to see you guys all next week at next week's podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.